Donald Trump wants dividend checks for everyone. Checks in the mail, as they say, announcing a $2,000 rebate or tariff dividend check over the weekend. Here he writes, people that are against tariffs are fools. We are the richest, most respected country in the world with almost no inflation and a record stock market price. 401ks are highest ever. We are taking in trillions of dollars and will soon begin paying down our enormous $37 trillion debt. Record investment in the USA, plants and factories going up all over the place, right? He's been getting everybody to invest in the good old US of A. And then he leaves you with this, which I highlighted, a dividend of at least $2,000 a person, he says not including high income people, will be paid to everyone. So pretty definitively declaring something that he's talked about. He's sort of mused about in the past. I want to go back to an appearance he made, maybe it was about 6 or 8 weeks ago on OAN. He talks about dividends and the idea of maybe giving $1,000 to $2,000 to each American. Now he's coming out definitively saying it's $2,000 per person, not including high-income people. He's not defining that specifically. We can talk about it, but here he is on OAN just a short time ago. Watch.
We also might make a distribution to the people, almost like a dividend to the people of America.
How much are you thinking for that, sir?
Well, we're thinking maybe $1,000 to $2,000. Be great.
Inflation is completely stable.
Yep.
It's around target rate, and the country is ultimately taking in unprecedented amounts of tariff revenue, more than $200 billion at this point in time, sir. What do you believe this extra source of revenue can be put towards, and how big of a game changer is it for your administration?
Well, ultimately, because we're talking about a just kicking in. They're just starting to kick in. But ultimately, your tariffs are going to be over $1 trillion a year, in my opinion. We're going to do something. We're looking at something where, number one, we're paying down debt because people have allowed the debt to go crazy. But, with growth, with the kind of growth we have now, the debt is very little, relatively speaking. You grow yourself out of that debt. It's not a question of paying it. You grow yourself out. And the numbers are so much bigger than they ever were. The numbers we have now are bigger than they ever were. So when you have $36 trillion in debt, a year ago or 2 years ago, and you have a lot less revenue coming in, then you have 37 or 38. It's not 38 yet, but it will be. And
then those are different things.
So
okay, so just to sort of break it down into, and what I love, by the way, is that we do have a president that can talk economics. Trust me, Joe Biden would have gotten lost like 20 seconds in to that soundbite. But what he's saying is like, we can handle more debt, possibly. Not that we ever want debt, but we can handle a little bit more. 37 trillion, which is a heck of a lot. It won't mean as much in the scheme of things if you're growing the economy fast, right? So if you've got a robust economy, it's like, if you're a family making $1 million a year and you have $100,000 in debt, percentage-wise, granted you don't want any debt, but hey, percentage-wise, it's a lot different than if you're a family making $100,000 a year and you have $80,000 or $90,000 in debt. You see, so he's making this comparison saying, hey, look, if we are able to grow our economy, then there's some room here for us to give these dividend checks. And like I said, he's talking $2,000, except for high earners. It was a very interesting carve out, and we can talk about that because one of my friends over the weekend, who's a constitutional law sort of scholar and mathematician, really, really bright guy, my friend Neil, and Neil is very conservative and loves Trump, but he's like, I don't know if we can get away with that, because if you're going to call this a dividend check, then maybe it just flat out has to go to every American voter, period, every American citizen. So this will be interesting to watch for. But you know what? He's no fool. He's been setting the stage, shall we say, since late July, when a reporter asked him about this, and he's like, yeah. Actually, you buddy, that's a smart question. You just made some news because I've been thinking about this for a while. Here we go. He's outside the White House.
Do you think there's the possibility of a rebate? We're thinking about that, actually. We have so much money coming in. We're thinking about a little rebate, but the big thing we want to do is pay down debt. But we're thinking about a rebate. That's a very good question. You just made a lot of news.
You just made some news, buddy. Yeah. And then over the weekend, as I said, on Sunday, now you'd think this would lead the newspapers everywhere, but yet you can't find it. You just can't find it because I think they worry and we know the bias in the mainstream media, they worry this would actually make him too popular. Maybe they worry it won't come to fruition. We'll have to see, because you know what this does actually do? It puts a ton more pressure on the Supreme Court of the United States, ladies and gentlemen, who happens to be working on making a decision regarding the president's tariffs as to whether or not they are legal. And that decision is going to go over much more negatively, would you say, with the American people, if in fact there's a $2,000 check hanging out there for everyone and everybody can get a dividend payment if the tariffs go through, and all of a sudden the Supreme Court says you can't do this. Now, a lot of questions as to the legality. I mean, what does the president really have in terms of his ability to do things here? He's got these emergency powers in the Emergency Economic Powers Act, and it's something that Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary of the United States, has spent a lot of time thinking about. He went on, my former colleague, actually Larry's a great guy. Larry and I worked together at CNBC, and we missed each other oddly at Fox. I had left by the time he went into Fox, but he's a wonderful, wonderful man. And he went on with Scott Bessent, or rather Scott Bessent went on with him and explained why it is that it's believed the president will be able to get these tariffs through. And again, keep in mind, if they go through, he's got to live up to this promise of $2,000 per person dividend check. So he's kind of, in my estimation, trying to get the public invested in what is somewhat of a complex, kind of, difficult sort of issue, if you would. Listen to Bessent.
Larry, I came away very optimistic. The Solicitor General presented a strong case for the president's use of the IEEPA, the emergency tariff powers, that President Trump has used to balance trade, to negotiate with the Chinese on fentanyl, to secure rare earth magnets, to get the Indians to stop buying Russian oil. And the Solicitor General made a fantastic case that the purpose of the tariffs is to rebalance global trade. We were in an economic emergency. We were near a tipping point, and you and I know exactly what that looks like. And President Trump has brought the U.S. back. On the other side, I thought that the plaintiffs almost embarrassed themselves. They clearly didn't understand foundational economics. They didn't understand the trade policy they were talking about.
Doesn't surprise me.
And I'm very optimistic, after listening to the questions at SCOTUS, that the IEEPA ruling is going to come President Trump and this administration's way.
Wow. Okay. So keep in mind, guys, it would be very costly if the Supreme Court suddenly decides this is not legal. Why would it be costly? Oh, we'd have to pay all those countries back, right? The tariffs. So that wouldn't be a very good scenario. So I kind of see this one as, he's got the ball and he's taking it and he's running with it all the way to the end zone. And the Supreme Court's like, whoa, if we don't okay this, what are we doing in terms of legitimacy of the executive office and its powers? What are we doing in terms of the overall sort of economic fragility of the country, which increasingly is looking better and better and better, right? As we look at the stock market, as we look at inflation coming down, still some real questions about jobs. Are we adding enough jobs in light of this sort of switch over to a very productive AI environment? And there's a lot of things to worry about within the context of that. But with this in mind, here he is kind of beating Mamdani to his own game. He's like, oh, Mamdani, you want free this, free that. Well, I'm coming out with a $2,000 dividend check. And that's because I'm making people money. I am making money for the United States of America. We're turning this thing into a business. Okay, government? I mean, unfortunately, we got the government back open and running pretty soon. I mean, fortunately, unfortunately, I just say unfortunately, just because it's kind of nice knowing that we can kind of exist somehow, some way, without them, right? Yeah, you don't need the government in business doing all that it's trying to do, because what do you know? Things have been A-okay so far.